I'm Jim Csek.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
We're here with Beyond the Ballot with NowMedia Group. So lots. So much election 2025. It's obviously the big thing on most people's minds. But we'll just start in BC. Supposedly, the carbon tax is gone today, April 1st, and that's not a
It
joke.
is.
Carbon tax is actually gone. But they're not seeing really the drop in the pumps in the Lower Mainland, though, which is
No,
odd, no?
and they can't yet. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of a mayhem. The law wasn't passed until 2 a.m. this morning. That really doesn't, I mean, it does say it goes into effect today, but it probably will say it'll be retroactive. So they don't have the regulation now. It's going to be very difficult for gas stations to really adjust yet. So I could see it taking just a little bit before it's fully in place. We also have to remember, though, that in the Lower Mainland, they have whole other taxes
Yeah.
that are put onto their gases. So we're going to definitely see still higher gas there, and the carbon tax is not going to get rid of the provincial tax either. So we're still going to see higher gas prices here in BC, but certainly it's one step in the right direction for consumers.
David Eby put out their press release saying that it was gone because of a divisive issue by the BC Conservatives and the federal Conservatives. And I'm thinking, well, maybe the Canadians thought it was divisive, right? Because, I mean, they're the ones that, like Pierre kind of put it to the forefront, and it's Canadians that really raised their ire on it. Not, they're trying to blame it on the Conservatives, but I would take credit if I was the Conservative and say that's a win for Canadians, because obviously they changed it because Canadians wanted it changed.
Canadians are done. Canadians have a very high cost of living. They're buckling under the pressure. They can't make ends meet. They're not able to live out their dreams in the same way that they were able to even 10 years ago. So this is definitely Canadians have spoken and Canadians have pushed back. So, to call this, divisive politics, I think is nothing more than sour grapes, that your policy was simply so unpopular, you were forced to remove it. Now, the one thing that I thought was really interesting about the debate last night is that, Peter Millibar, MLA from Kamloops, went head to head with Brenda Bailey, and he could not get anything in terms of an answer out of her as to how that $2 billion to $3 billion gap is going to be made up in our budget. If I was the NDP right now, that's what I'd be freaking out about, because that is a massive amount of deficit to try and make up, and that's in addition to the already 11 billion that they're predicting. So I know he went head to head for a few hours on that point, just to try and figure out how they were going to make up for it, but did not have an answer for it. So the 2 weeks of reprieve certainly didn't allow Brenda Bailey any time to actually figure out her budget.
Yeah, likely they just don't know, right? That's the real answer. They just don't know.
They don't have any other levers. And, you and I have talked about this before, that really we are not, this is not a government that is super skilled at stimulating the economy. We're seeing our economic numbers drop and decline. We're seeing, the numbers from the small business associations, really in the toilet. And so there isn't anything in this budget to really give any sort of relief to businesses and stimulate the economy and say in any way, shape, or form that we're open for business.
Yeah, and then so the Fed's also dropping it across Canada. So you should see 17 to 18 cents a liter and 21 cents a liter on your diesel fuel. So we'll see if that plays out. Quebec still has it, though. So Quebec is the last province not to have it. So I said that Ian and I did the really big show this morning, and we said, how many Quebec plates are you going to see in Ottawa from Gatineau this morning? You know what I mean? Because it says Quebecers want the carbon tax. I'm just like, well, we'll see how many really want it when they drive over to Ontario to get their gasoline cheaper.
Yeah, I don't see that remaining very long. That's for sure. That's for sure.
So election 2025, the big news, I guess, is the Paul Chang thing that happened, where Paul Chang had made those comments about turning over a Conservative MP to the Hong Kong police for bounty. And then, there was pressure for the Conservative Party to get him to resign. And then Mark Carney stuck up for him and then said that, he apologized and that's that. And then he'd staying in there. And now, since then, there's a police investigation open and Paul Chang resigned.
And finally, Paul Chang resigned. I think, though, that if I was Carney, that resignation was actually quite unfortunate, because it was a lost leadership move. And what this really showed to Canadians is that Carney is not going to stand up to China. He has not stood up to China on the tariffs. There has not been one murmur of retaliatory tariffs with respect to what China has labored on onto Canada. So, he has not stood up on tariffs. He has not stood up with respect to his own MP candidate, and I think this speaks very, very poorly to his leadership and to his leadership on this issue. The other thing that that he went off about was his conversation with Trump and how great that conversation was. It resulted in absolutely nothing. I don't know what kind of conversation he had, but there is absolutely no change to what Trump is doing as of tomorrow. So for me, it doesn't bode very well for strength or for leadership or for someone who is trying to win the hearts of Canadians. I thought that Pierre did a great job of really capitalizing on that moment by saying, if he's not going to stand up to China, is he really going to stand up for Canadians at all? And I think that's very apropos. The other news that came out that I think we all should have pause about is that Carney's $250 million loan from Beijing to Brookfield just in January, I think is very concerning and could give a reason for why he is not pursuing China in a more aggressive fashion.
Yeah, he's had recent trips there as well, and there is some ties there. And it seems like even the Trudeau Liberals had, there was a bunch of, the Hong Kong police station or the Chinese police stations, the Wuhan lab link with Winnipeg, and then this election interference stuff. There seems to be that there's a lot of Chinese meddling, and they seem to be a little softer on China than they are on India, because on India they seem to go, completely in a different direction.
Yeah, and this was what Trump was concerned about. I mean, Trump talked a lot about national security, a lot about China infiltration into Canada. And Steve Bannon has also echoed those same concerns. I think we need to really wake up. I think that we as Canadians have allowed a lot of infiltration from China, and I think that this was just one example of them trying to influence our election. And I think that we need to take note. This is one of the reasons that our neighbors are upset with us. And for Carney to take such a passive stance, I think, and all day yesterday, what was it, 6 times he was asked by this, in one press conference, if he still supported his candidate. For 6 times him to stand up and say, yes, I absolutely do. This is a teachable moment. This is what we are, here for. I think showed a complete lack of leadership. And I think a really dangerous message for Canadians.
Yeah, I just think that he really kind of missed a moment there where he could have, forced that resignation, and instead he stuck up for him. And, this, even CBC had really went at him for it and said that, this was a really bad moment in his leadership. And then it really kind of blows up in his face when the police investigation starts, and then Paul Chang himself resigns, right?
Yeah, that was just weak leadership all the way around. I can't imagine what political advisor was telling Carney not to take swift action, but in an election, you just don't have time. Now all anyone's going to be talking about is the story that took days to actually unfold, rather than a swift action. You saw in Toronto one of Pierre's candidates, being accused of treasonous behavior by calling on a comedy show for the hanging of Trudeau, immediately removed. There wasn't even a question. It came up once, it was done, and you're not going to hear of it again. So I think that's leadership, and that's how you take care of those election issues.
That was really good, actually.
What was really, in that same press conference yesterday, what was really, really telling for me, and I know that you and I have gone back and forth on Carney, and is Carney genuine in what he's saying about the energy sector and about how he wants to stimulate the energy sector. Yesterday was his first tell, in that he outright refused to repeal Bill C-69, which is the anti-pipeline bill. Without repealing that bill, we're not going to see pipelines built. So he is completely disingenuous when he says that he wants to stimulate our energy sector. I think this was his first tell where it was like, this is just going to be more of the same, and maybe his values book is more earnest than what he's saying right now on the campaign trail.
Yeah, so Pierre Poilievre seemed to be dropping a policy almost every day, and Mark Carney not so much, right? So there's a lot of policies that Pierre's dropped, and one of them I thought was really, really good was the reinvestment tax credit. Like that seems like, or the capital gains one.
That is a game changer. What it does is it signals to companies to keep their money here. It's going to take less money for the actual for taxation. So it's going to be a bigger boon to companies that are reinvesting in Canada. I think this is a huge move and a promise that if it's successful in stimulating our economy and getting investment dollars back into Canada, that it will continue to 2026. I actually was talking with some business people that are both Canadian and U.S. and they were saying this is with this policy that would absolutely be a reason for them to keep their money in Canada and to see it go farther and faster. So I think this is a huge move. I think that if this is in earnest, it will be a game changer for Canada's economy in the short term, but also in the long term because Pierre promised to make it permanent if it's successful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's one reason for sure that this is definitely advantageous because a lot of people are sitting on capital gains and are kind of like reluctant to kind of like crystallize them or sell something because they got to pay that capital gains. But if you can move it from one property to the other property or to in stocks and stuff like that, wow, what a boom, right? Like it would just, I think it would be like he says it's rocket fuel. And I would agree as an accountant, I would say that this is absolutely rocket fuel.
Jim, I think it even goes farther than that. I think that it's not just companies sitting on or people sitting on capital gains that they don't want to declare in terms of crystallizing them and selling their asset. I think it's even farther than that. I think they've already done it. They've taken their money, they've pushed it into the U.S. or they pushed it into Europe. You know, I met with another developer out of Toronto just in January, and they were saying that they're going global. They're not looking at the U.S. They're absolutely looking at new projects in the EU. We're seeing companies taking their money out and redeploying it. This would give them incentive to stay here, an incentive to actually reinvest in the Canadian economy. I think it's brilliant, and I think it's long overdue.
I think that's what Canada.
When you say long overdue, the U.S. already has these things. Yeah. The U.S. already has 15 mechanisms that people and that businesses can use to lessen the taxation and redeploy their money back into the U.S. So I think that this actually is going to allow us to catch up with countries that have already done this.
We're shooting a movie here today, and Rommel, if you could just ask them to move their noise to the further down the hall for now, that would be greatly appreciated. Just they need to move out of here for right now, right? Because it's just. It's really hard to concentrate, but we are shooting a movie here today. But lots of good policies. The other one that I thought is the TFSA. I thought that was great because that was one of the things that the Harper government brought in, the TFSA, and I think it's one of the greatest things, especially for youth. They can open a TFSA and it's a tax-free savings account, and in there they can invest in stocks and interest-bearing items. It's such a great thing, and then allowing that top up. And then with tools like Wealthsimple now, kids can actually choose, young people can choose between buying a $9 sugar coffee or buying some cheap stock. Like not cheap stock, but a fractional stock, I should say. They can buy $9 worth of Lululemon or whatever other Canadian company they want to buy. They can actually go and buy that instead of buying something that's not good for them.
Yeah, and youth are using these mechanisms. They're using the TFSA. They're using the first-time home buyer RSP. They're trying anything because they're desperate. Yeah. Let's be honest. I saw the polling numbers for Carney that women were polling higher, and I just find that really difficult to believe. Not for me as a woman with reproductive rights, but for me as a woman who already has children. I know how much my 20-year-olds are struggling right now to see themselves in a future that we actually took for granted. One that allowed us to have children, allowed us to have a home as modest as it may be, or a townhouse, etc. They just don't see themselves getting into the market at all right now. Really difficult times for them. And, for me as a mom, that's something that I'm really focused on is, who has the best policies for the next generation. And so far I haven't seen anything from Carney that would make me think otherwise. His housing policy, and if we stay on the housing aspect, his housing policy came out, I actually tweeted or put on X, this is really dangerous. A really great local commentator, Davis Kyle, he commented back and said, why do you say this is dangerous? Like, I think there's some really good redeeming things in this policy. For me, that was the number one, was that Carney thought that he's going to build 500,000 homes. He's going to get back into building. Government's going to build these properties, and it's going to be all subsidized and subsidized housing. Nowhere does he talk about ownership. Nowhere does he talk about what they're going to do to actually get people into these affordable units. It's just all about them, they're going to build them. Well, I have to remind everyone that was almost verbatim what was said in 2015 by Trudeau, what was said again just in 2022, that they're going to build these 500,000 homes. It just has not happened. Their Housing Accelerator Fund has not resulted in that meaningful change. And if anything, we got to get government out of the way, not more government in the way. And you're going to see a flee of developers that will take their capital elsewhere because they don't want to compete against government agencies. And we saw that happen with BC Housing when they came into, Kelowna and started jacking up the prices of land because they would pay anything because they're not beholden to a bank or a financial institution that tells them they have to make certain thresholds.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that question because you do development. And the couple of things that stuck out for me there is Trudeau's Liberals, which is the same team basically. Trudeau's Liberals said they were going to build 650,000 homes a year to meet these targets. And that there was a leaked document that said that is never going to happen. The record was like 274, and that was by CMHC. And said that it can't happen for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have the labor force that can actually build the home, so where are you going to get it? And the second part that really they lowered the target from 650 to 500, but again, it says the record, which is in the 70s when we had a young workforce, was 274, I think it is. And all of a sudden, we're going to double that number, and the government's going to build houses. We know what happens when the government builds things. And I think Ronald Reagan said it best, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. If I'm from the government, I'm here to build, right? So, because you're right, typically it makes it uncompetitive because government has your money to work with where you actually have to go out and earn it to reinvest it, to put it in, you know what I mean? Like it's their access to capital is easy because they pull it out of your pocket, right? So.
Yeah, and if you look at how much BC Housing is building for, they're typically almost double what a developer builder can build on their own. It's just not economical. It's not economical. The government agencies put all sorts of requirements and all sorts of stipulations, all sorts of specifications that are simply untenable. And for government to sit there and say, and for Carney to think that he's going to somehow come in and do, double what we're doing today with the entire industry is so, naive, ridiculous. I don't know. He is simply not going to accomplish it. And I think it's dangerous policy. I don't think it's the type of policies that we want to see moving forward.
Do you think that, because it doesn't seem like the Liberals are putting out a lot of policy platform thing, do you think they're really just relying on the Trump thing? Do you think that's their main thing?
Absolutely. Even look at Paul Chang's, resignation letter and his withdrawal letter. Not once did he talk about, his errors or how he should have behaved or how, what he did wrong. All he talked about was Trump and how Trump, was horrible. And that is all they are focused on. They are desperate to make Trump the new COVID. And Carney, that's his only hope. I mean, he's looking at the polls. He knows that people are concerned and afraid of what's going to happen with these Trump tariffs and with this volatility. And that's what they're capitalizing on, is this fear. The only party that has given us a map forward is Pierre. And it's not a map that he developed in the last 2 weeks, which is what it seems that Carney's platform has been developed over. He literally is taking from the conservatives and just parroting over and over and over again. What Pierre has developed is the last 2 years saying how he is going to actually stimulate the economy and develop other trade partners and get us decoupled from the U.S. That is what we need to do. And we need to be an energy giant in order to do it. And, Carney saying yesterday he's not going to repeal C-69 is very short-sighted and really tells the truth.
How do we get our number one asset to other ports if we don't do that? I just don't know if there's some magic buttons or something like that works. I don't really want to give this a lot of air, but I don't know. I'm just going to ask you this question because it was posed to me and it said this is why the polls are like this too. And it said that a couple guys reached out to me on LinkedIn that are very well, like high up in like oil field stuff, and said that they actually want Carney to win, because they say that that's what Trump wants as well. They want Trump to win, wants Carney to win, so that there will be a unity crisis in Canada.
I don't know what that would actually amount to. I mean, other than we would be very weak, we would be very easily played with, toyed with. Carney's book basically says he doesn't want a democracy. He wants it owned by, he wants countries that are owned by banks and owned by the financial institutions. He's not talking about sovereignty. He's not talking about a strong Canada. He's talking about a very weak Canada. Maybe Trump is more interested in that. I don't know. Maybe Trump's also interested in the fact that Carney gave, his son-in-law a huge loan and bought a 99-year prepaid lease from, Jared Kushner for $1 billion. I don't know what the end game is, other than Trump seems fond of Carney, which to me means that he's not going to be much of a match against Trump.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really bode well. I don't know. Like I said, I don't really want to give that a lot of air, but it does seem like all of a sudden he seems to favor Carney, and he's actually calling him prime minister and different things, and the good talks, and it just seems, I don't know. It's hard to tell what Trump does, and he's unpredictable and volatile and bombastic and a whole bunch of those things, and
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up. You cannot believe words; you have to believe actions,
yeah.
right? So, what are the words that Carney is saying? He's gonna stimulate our energy sector, but he is not going to repeal Bill C-69. What is Trump saying? Had a good chat with Carney, but what is Trump not going to do? He is not going to, move on the tariffs that are coming in tomorrow. So, for me, it could have been a very cordial conversation. Trump might have thought it was awesome because, Carney capitulated. The advisory company or consulting firm that Gerald Butts and Carney's wife all belong to basically said, yeah, there's going to be strong talk during the election, but Ottawa's going to capitulate afterwards. So, is that indeed what they see? Well, it certainly is for Carney. I would hope that we don't capitulate, but I hope that we get very strong outside of Trump. I don't think we need to fight him. I think we just need to match him by going outside of the US for our trade.
I think the real fight, though, for Carney is, I think if I was the reporter allowed in the room, I would ask him to define what energy means to him, because I think when he's talking about energy, he's talking about a different kind of energy. I've talked about it before. We have our star players benched, and we are playing, minor league players. And I think when he's talking energy, he's talking solar, and he's talking wind, and and maybe nuclear, because there's a lot of provinces that don't like nuclear. But I don't think he's talking LNG and oil and gas, and to the extent that like Pierre Poilievre would say in Unleash the Beast, right?
Absolutely. Drill, baby, drill. That's what we need to do. And, is Trump going to like that? No, Trump will not like the fact that we're going outside of our borders. Trump will not like the fact that we're finding other partners. In fact, Trump actually said, if you guys team up with the EU, I'm going to get those tariffs even harder. You know what, Trump? You are not even a billion people. There are 7.7 billion people outside of the United States of America that want what Canada has to offer. So fine. You know what? You don't like us? That's okay. We'll go and find other partners. And the only way that we can find other partners is to be Australia and actually get our LNG and our oil off of our borders. The other aspect to this, and I really hope I hear some of this with some of these candidates, and I have not heard this from Pierre's camp, and I have not heard this from Carney's camp, is we really need to fuel our manufacturing sector and stop just shipping off raw goods off of our borders, but really look at what is the value add. How do we really incentivize and grow that sector to a larger extent. And I don't think it just comes from creating a lot of manufacturing jobs. I think it also comes from incenting and accelerating technology, because I think in order for Canada to really increase our productivity numbers, we are going to have to utilize our robotics and our technology sector to really figure out how we can manufacture better, and how we can manufacture in a really, really cost efficient way. And I think that if we did that, we would actually have that value add to all of our raw goods that I think would bode very well for Canadian economy.
Yeah, if you look at our, like as an accountant, if you look at our assets that we have and then look at our deployment of such assets or non-deployment of such assets, and I would say mining, we have some of the best miners in the world. Some of the best mining companies in the world are Canadian listed companies and moving to the US. But they don't mine here in Canada anymore because it takes 18 years to get a mine permitted. 18 years. So like, I mean, and you can go somewhere else and the environmental hurdles, the costs and all that stuff, it just, like, so companies like B2 Gold and, like Kinross and all those kind of things, they just look elsewhere, right? Because it's just easier. But the technology, the guys, the mining professionals and the companies are Canadian and they're just not deployed on our soil. And the same goes for our oil and gas. Look at what it does. It's the number one contributor to our GDP, and it's crippled, right? Do you know what I mean? It's crippled because it doesn't have, a Northern Gateway pipeline, an East-West pipeline. Western Canadian Select has been selling at a discount for how many years? Like forever, right? Because we have one customer, and they say, well, that's the price you get, right? What is it? Typically a 30% discount, Western Canadian Select to West Texas Intermediate, right?
Yeah. And we have to stop. I mean, we absolutely have goods and natural resources. And I love that you use the mining sector. I also say forestry.
Yep.
I've seen forestry maps that talk about the housing industry down in the States, where they can't use a lot of the softwood lumber that they create because it's just not conducive to house building. It's too soft, and so they need those the different wood products that Canada produces. And right now, we can't even get it out of our borders. We can't seem to harvest it. So I think that we're really looking at which candidate can lower our cost of living, get us better paying jobs, and really give us a vision forward for our economy, and how, what is that going to look like? And so far, I don't hear Carney talking about any of those things. In fact, Carney almost is getting this a little bit chaotic feel about his campaign. I think largely because he's trying to be something he's not. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel true. He's really got to work on his facial expressions when he's being interviewed. He's got some really dismissive type of expression, and I think that that really I think you're going to start seeing some of that come out with just his lack or lack of credibility when it comes to really navigating some of these items.
Yeah, I did interviews, lots of forestry interviews, and I did one with the vice president of AP Planers, Bruce Rose. And he said the problem is with forestry is that they'll show pictures like of Stanley Park, and actually a lot of people in the Lower Mainland think you're cutting down trees in Stanley Park. You go look at those big, massive trees. They don't understand that the forests that we have out here in the Okanagan, interior BC, and north of BC are different types of trees, and they need to be actively managed, or else we have massive wildfires all the time.
Agreed. We need a comprehensive forestry plan where we actually take the wildfire specialists. And, I had a privilege when I was at the MLA for Kelowna Mission to go into some of our forests and see where the fire had raged through, where they had been actively managed, and where they had not been. And there's literally a line of delineation where the fire did not burn all of the trees that were there because it had been selectively harvested, and where they had managed the undergrowth and the brush underneath. And it was absolutely unbelievable. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe that there could literally be a line where the fire didn't go any further because it didn't have the fuels necessary. We need that all over our province because we're burning millions of hectares and we're producing massive amounts of carbon. We have one atmosphere. So if we're really concerned about climate change, then we need to get very, very concerned about how we manage our forests. And right now, we're letting them literally go up in flames.
Yeah, when I interviewed David Eby in the provincial election, I talked to him about permitting, and I said permitting seems to be a problem. Many of the people are saying they can't get permits, even for burnt lumber. There was a documentary done out of Merritt and said there's burnt trees and they can't get permitting. And he said right then, he admitted, he said, you know what, Jim, we have a problem. But I don't think they're fixing the problem. That's the problem I see. The problem is I don't think they're fixing the problem.
They are not fixing the problem. Look at the laws that they've brought in, virtually none, and even the ones that they brought in, that nothing has had anything relative to the forestry sector. They put a very junior minister. Ravi Parmar is basically a talking head for the NDP. He does not have any sort of level of sophistication, knowledge, acumen to understand forestry or to understand how that would actually go about happening. They have not put this as a priority on their list. And that's why Brenda Bailey sits in the Legislative Assembly last night until 2 a.m., not being able to give an answer for how we're actually going to fill that revenue gap. And they don't have an answer. They don't have any revenue. Are they going to keep taxing us? 33 new and improved taxes from this NDP government in the 7 year, almost 8 years that they've been in power. We can't take anymore. I mean, it's crippling, and we can't be taxed any further.
And maybe we'll end with this, and this is a story we're trying to work on, and maybe I'll ask you the question because you sat in government here in BC. We're seeing hospital closures, which is devastating for communities like Merritt, Lillooet. We're telling people in Lillooet that they have to drive to Kamloops, and during wintertime, like even now, the roads may be closed. So what are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to do if you're in Lillooet? It's really tough. So the question we were asking is, and we're trying to get this answer, we've posed it, why can't they, we flew Bonnie Henry with a helicopter almost every day to go to the podium. Why can't they take a doctor or a nurse, because usually it's only one missing, and fly a helicopter from Vancouver, offer whatever doctor or nurse double the salary to go and work a shift in Lillooet or Merritt so they can keep that hospital open? Because a helicopter would get them there in 45 minutes or less? So we're trying to track down this story and ask why we aren't pulling out all the stops for all these communities that are basically not even getting basic health care.
Yeah, we don't even have to go from Vancouver. We could easily pull them from Kelowna or from Kamloops and pull them into Merritt or Lillooet, etc. I was recently with a board member, a former board member that was with me on the Interior Health Authority board, and we were actually having this very conversation where we said, do you ever remember in all of those years on the board having closures like they're having today? I don't ever remember closing a single ER, never mind closing them every other weekend. And the public outcry is warranted and should remain. If we don't see this continue, I think the new normal will have been absorbed, and there are answers. Now, what is really scary to me is that we just saw Minister Josie Osborne appoint for almost $400,000 Penny Ballum to be the one to go in and take over PHSA and look at redoing all of the efficiency quotients for all of the different health authorities. That is like the blind leading the blind, like the one that created the mess going in and trying to fix the mess. The arsonist going out to put out the fire. This is the most ridiculous exercise I've ever seen. There should be an external company hired to do a full audit on all of the health authorities. And this is just going to result us in more of the same. And you're absolutely right, Jim. We should, continue to hear the public outcry. I hope the mayors continue to emulate the mayor of Merritt, Michael Gates, who absolutely is saying, this is unacceptable. We need to keep hearing that loudly and clearly because, as a mom who's delivered babies, you don't have time to wait, and you certainly don't have time to drive 2 hours to get to the next nearest hospital.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that the mayor of Merritt, we've done quite a few stories with him, and he is outspoken, and he's asking for help, and he's getting pretty more outspoken, because the problem's getting worse, because this problem doesn't usually show up till the summertime when the doctors and nurses start taking holidays, but it showed up early. It's already happening, and it shouldn't be happening yet. So it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. And then we did talk to other mayors, and they don't want to talk because they're scared what little help they do get will get worse. That's pretty bad.
That's very bad. But this NEP government is retaliatory. They have been so. They have proven that they will be so. They are absolutely vindictive, very, very punitive when it comes to those that speak out. It's why the whistleblowers are very scared to come forward. It's why it's taken so long for MLA Sturco to really get the story forward on the decriminalization and the safe supply that's hitting our streets, because those that are inside the system are absolutely horrifically afraid of speaking out against this government because they are so retaliatory in nature.
Well, we're trying to help. So instead of just causing or making noise, we're actually finding out how much it costs for a helicopter ride from, say, Kelowna to Merritt. And then, because I mean, how many helicopter rides could you buy for $400,000? Probably enough to keep that hospital going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could probably get that number for you because
Yeah.
I do know some great helicopter companies. So
Because there's a lot of young doctors and nurses that have lots of student loans and say, hey, we'll double your salary for the day. You're going there. We're going to fly you in, fly you back. Cool ride, right? Because again, we spent all that money with Bonnie Henry when she was flying to the podium and back on a helicopter every day. We seem to find the budget for that. So I'm sure we can find the budget for the people of Lillooet, the people of Merritt, the people of 100 Mile House, all these small hospitals that seem to be don't have enough to run an ER department. And again, if that's your loved one that can't access emergency care, and they call it emergency care for a reason, right? Like your legs cut off or something like that, then like it's ridiculous. That should be a basic level of service. And I guess the only thing we can do is try to embarrass this NDP government into action.
yeah, and we need a new model. I mean, we need a model that we do see more of those transfers going on in between different healthcare authorities, that we do see housing located at all of the rural and remote hospitals so that they can easily house different staff that need to come in and out. I remember that when I sat on the finance committee, there was a proposal that was done by the anesthesiologists, in which they had gone out and done a full audit of all the different surgical suites that were all around the province, and had identified that they could increase the number of surgeries delivered by 30% without a single capital dollar, just by sending out remote teams. And the benefits that were possible, and the indirect benefits of training other staff that were in rural and remote locations, and having people closer to home, etc., were so prolific that for me it just didn't make any sense why we wouldn't be taking that. We need a new set of eyes, and Penny Ballum is certainly not that set of eyes for us.
That's a great show again, as usual. We're just going to announce this, we're going to do the election like Renee and I did the provincial election. We were there right to the bitter end till we called it, and we're going to do the federal election as well. So that's April 28th. We'll be here with you, and we'll get some really cool graphics and stuff like that too. We'll really try to amp it up. We'll have the full team working. And then we're actually going to sit down and talk platform stuff too. We're going to analyze the platforms as we move forward, as they start releasing more platform ideas. We're seeing a lot out of Pierre right now. We're seeing not so much out of the Liberals, and I don't know what I've seen. Like Jagmeet just says stuff, and I don't really like. I mean, a lot of his stuff, he doesn't really have to be serious about a platform, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of the NDP whatsoever.
Yeah. I think he's going to try to spend most of his money just to hang on to his own seat.
Probably. Although he was in Victoria at the Empress over the weekend, so I'm not sure what he was doing there.
There you go. We do thank you for your time, and then we'll be back next week with Beyond the Ballot, and we'll have a schedule out. We'll start doing these things. Great chat again, Renee, and such an important time, right? Election 2025 on everybody's mind, right?
Absolutely. Have a great one.
We do thank you for watching NowMedia.